Welcome to Practical Psychology Podcast, episode 14. My name is Joseph. I am one of the co hosts. Today, we are very happy to have Mana joining us today. Mana is a currently psychotherapist in training doing her master degree program. Mana brought in a lot of experience with her undergraduate degree in neuroscience from University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Mana also come from the culture of Iran. So she has a lot of experience about how to integrate the Canadian Iranian culture and what does it mean for psychotherapy for both individual, couple, and family psychotherapy. Welcome, Mana.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Mana, we are very interested to learn more about you, your psychotherapy approach. How about you tell us more about you write down about emotional regulations versus emotional suppression. Tell us a little bit about it first.
So, growing up in Iran and being raised there, I always had a mm, interest in helping people and understanding their emotions and their behaviors. It started when I saw my mom practicing as a gynecologist and being in a position where she could help people. But it was always interesting to me that mental health, because it is not like other this physical distresses that are on the surface. Mental health, those wounds are not um, on the surface, so they can be overlooked. And it was always interesting to me to find that out. Um, Growing up in Iran and seeing how being composed and calm is often prioritized rather than one expressing their emotions and distress. It is very important to me to be able to educate people about how important it is not to push down these emotions and feel them rather than suppressing them. That is one thing I want to cultivate in my practice and psychoeducate people about. And I see that in Western cultures, even though it is praised to express oneself, it is also the vulnerability comes with a lot of discomfort. In my little practice experience right now in my practicum, I've seen people from the Western culture, born and raised here in Canada, express how they often um, shy away from expressing themselves and being their true authentic self because they want to avoid disagreements and social any distress that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mana. How
Mhm.
about you tell us a little bit about this? Because I know a lot of viewers are not familiar with
Mhm.
different specialty of doctor. You mentioned your mother is the OBGYN specialist doctor in Iran. Can you tell the viewers what exactly does it mean, OBGYN?
So she's a gynecologist and a fertility specialist there in Iran, and she was always so selfless, always helping people, always prioritizing their needs. So it was, and seeing how much it fulfills her and gives her that sense of good doing. I was always inspired by that. But at the same time, when I started my undergrad studies at UBC, I initially wanted to follow into her footsteps and become a medical doctor. But it all changed once I took an elective in psychology and realized how much I enjoy learning about it. Because I do believe that once you're very good at something, you also like doing it, like any job. But for to get that good and to become that expert, it's important for there to be an interest. So I was very interested in psychology. I always enjoyed reading and learning. So it was the right path for me. And I finished my undergrad studies at UBC, and then I wanted to work. I wanted to pursue a master's degree where I could get hands-on, one-on-one client therapeutic experience rather than just research oriented. So I chose Yorkville University to pursue my master's, and I learned a lot. But as I'm just beginning my practicum with you, it is way more mm, like the learning experience is way more bolder now that I'm in practice and I get to see how clients act, how what their thoughts are, what their problems are. So it's very interesting and I love it.
And I can see the passion and
Mhm.
your attitude and your drive that you love psychotherapy here.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the emotional regulations. Because
Mhm.
your mother is in the field of the OB GYN, the reproductive fertility health.
Mhm.
And a lot of the misconception is people by default think fertility is a by default easy process, but actually a lot of people, a substantial percentage, according to research, they
Mhm.
suffer from infertility, and that can create a lot of emotional distress and the emotional regulations and all that here. Manna, tell us
Yeah.
more a little bit along that line there.
Yeah. So from what I've heard from her, and I've also shadowed her multiple times, but there's so many women that come in with anxiety about whether they can get pregnant, the cultural expectations on them, especially in Iran, for women. It's way harder. It's like a given that you need to give birth to a child, and there's so many problems that comes with that because the attachments being shaped with the mother and the child, um, it can be something put upon a person. It should be a mother has to want to be a mother. So once that's not there, there's going to be lots of problems for the children, for the mother.
Yeah.
There's postpartum depression, and it's so many cultures, especially in Middle Eastern culture. It's not very often talked about. There's
Mhm.
no maternal leave, for example,
Mhm.
per se. You can get it's not called maternal leave. You can ask for
Mhm.
it. But here in Canada, for example, we have maternal leave, which is nice. But it is important to
Mhm.
also care about the mental aspect of giving birth and healthcare.
Oh yeah, Manna, you mentioned about the before, during, and after the entire the pregnancy.
Hmm.
Reproductive mental health is one of the big segment and reason people seeking counseling, no matter it's individual, couple, family, or parenting counseling.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and you mentioned a very good point there. When there's infertility problems, in fact, a lot of public don't even know there's a subspecialty, OBGYN.
Hmm.
There are doctors specialized to do that
Hmm.
because there's a lot of people suffering and create both the woman's and man's issues
Hmm.
because not having problems with fertility create a lot of stigma for both genders,
For sure,
as
yes.
you
Even
mentioned.
for the men as well,
Yeah. Mhm.
fertility and reproductive health is very important and it's often stigmatized and there's expectations behind it. But I think it should be talked about and
Mhm.
embraced in a different way where it's both aligned with both parents and for the future of the children.
Yeah, it's very interesting manner. In the clinic, we're also talking about uh, having a specialized team to address the reproductive health. Because, for example, let's say by adoption, IVF, or other method for fertility, after maybe 20 years when the child grew up to be an adult, there will be other ethical issues about lowering other siblings and other things here. Some families might choose to keep it as a taboo or secret.
Mm-hmm,
And at
yeah.
the same time, some family might rely on professional or research or technology to tackle this better.
Yes, it is for sure indeed a very important topic, and because familial systems and how we are raised and the community, the family that we know is very important in how it shapes our personality, our behavior, our everything. So I think it's very important for families to be mindful
Mhm.
of that.
Also, man, for you, from your family background, with that medical background, you come in a great foundation to understand not just by the books, but real experience.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
of therapy, my approach is mostly integrative. Like I think it's like biology, like the mind, the brain healing itself. It's not just psychology and just talking, it's also the biology of brain. And with the therapeutic bond, with the right safety, emotional safety, we can um, basically rewire our brains for the better. So how it happens is called
Mhm, mhm.
neuroplasticity, where you can,
Yeah.
by practicing better functional patterns, you can actually rewire your brain to take that as an automatic. But change, I think, happens when there is awareness. And in therapy,
Mm,
a therapist helps the client cultivate that awareness and think about that in a different way and see the bigger picture. So I think it's very important uh,
mm.
for people to have that safe space where they feel emotionally safe to express themselves and explore their thoughts, their emotions, their behaviors with their therapist. And I aspire to do that.
Well, yeah, Manny, you mentioned about the awareness, the change, the safety here. I want to ask you first, because you study in UBC, neuroscience, which is a very technical science degree here. Okay. So, what are some of the things that you apply to your psychotherapy today, Friday?
Mhm. So one thing I personally, I think so many clients come and they're waiting for the right moment. They're waiting for motivation to be there to do things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to apply in my practice is that I think motivation doesn't just you're not you don't have to be motivated to take action. It can come from
Mhm,
taking action. So, for example, if you take up physical exercise and you start by moving even a little in the day, you cultivate that in your routine. It also enhances the motivation to do other things. So I think everything is intertwined, and by breaking tasks down into little things that are sustainable and that are doable, then they can rewire their brain and take up new practices that come up that just happen automatically after a certain time. Um, but one of the other things that really changes the neural
mhm,
pathways and how our brain um, functions is the thoughts that we have. So I think
mhm,
I have that too. Like nobody criticizes anyone more than they do themselves. It's like we all have that inner critic that is always there telling us, no,
mhm,
you're a failure, it's bad. And people, when they're in the vulnerable stages of changing, encountering a setback or a failure can be very drastic for them, that they can give up or just procrastinate, avoid it. But when you have a therapist where I aspire to encourage them to take the failure as
mhm.
a lesson that they can get back up from, not just avoid it or leave it altogether.
Yeah, man, you mentioned many great points here. I want to kind of go back so we don't miss those two key points you mentioned about. You mentioned about your study of neuroscience, about how things work in the brain, which is a very technical studies here. And from that research studies and the evidence, there's also point to some therapies evidence-based based on science compared to other less evidence-based practices. You mentioned about the motivation and behavior, which one is first. You also mentioned about the thoughts and changing the neural pathway there. Without that research and understanding here, it will be all personal opinions here. But you are able to have that background for you to drive your psychotherapy is based on research, not just personal opinion, which is very important. I want to point that out for the viewers here.
Yes. And I like to, I think in my practice, I'm just starting my practicum, but even after, I want to integrate multiple approaches. I want to get from CBT, IFS, internal family systems, dialectical behavioral therapy, because I think taking up from different modalities based on the client's needs is also very important. But for sure, having that evidence-based modality and approach to take up on from is also very important. And to be able to understand that healing is not just about the surface and just the talk therapy, it's also how the brain cultivates it and how our body also restores this emotion. For example, when you're stressed or when you're mm, dealing with trauma, it can also manifest in body pain, like tense shoulders, stiff neck. It can be also manifested in our bodies. So it's important to also look for these bodily sensations. And when we're experiencing emotions, it's important to also look for where we're feeling it in our bodies, because that's also telling us something. So I think
Yeah,
having
and
an approach is very important.
yeah, and Mena, what you are mentioning here is for the different modalities, they all points to the basic human process, which
Mhm,
is the awareness and
mhm,
changing the neural pathway here. That is very powerful.
mhm. Yes, for
It's
sure.
actually quite interesting here, Mena, because when people talk about different treatment modalities, they're
Mhm,
all working on that cognitive process, the neuroscience there.
mhm. Yeah.
Similar to for people who study physics, like gravity. It's the basic principle, but we have all different things, for example, skydiving, dirt biking, surfing, and skiing. And all those are tackling the fundamental gravity.
Mhm.
If gravity doesn't exist, all these become irrelevant.
For sure, yes. And I think, as you mentioned, a change, it happens when you're aware of something. And our once we have so much cognitive distortions that we can't be aware of what is the underlying reason behind certain behaviors, and we don't necessarily look into it and overlook it, then we probably won't be able to change it sustainably. But once you're in therapy, you realize and you explore that there is underlying reasoning behind a certain behavior,
Mhm.
then you're able to change it. It's my opinion. With the right,
Yeah.
yes, with the right techniques.
And man, every single day when you're doing psychotherapy, you're analyzing behavior and helping the client. From what you are seeing, when we talk about awareness, when you see in your clients, what is some of the obstacles for that self-awareness for some of these clients?
So many people, I think, they want to avoid it. They don't want to necessarily. There may be some avoidance behaviors when there may be resistant clients that don't want to necessarily explore the distressing matters. Because, of course, maybe especially in clients with trauma, there are very heavily charged emotions there. There may be very traumatic events that have happened. So, um, automatically, the brain wants to protect itself. So you tend to avoid it. You tend to forget about it. And it's even true. So many traumatized clients, when you want to ask about what the traumatic events, they tend to not even remember, because it's our way of self-protection to avoid dealing with that. But it is very important to face it, and it is even with gradual exposure. It doesn't have to be all at once, but in therapy, with gradual exposure, depending on the client's needs and where they're at in the stages of being ready for change, we cultivate awareness by tapping into those emotions and suppressed feelings. Yes.
Yeah, Manna, you're mentioning about clients being the resistance to therapy, the avoidance, and also the body is trying to protect itself.
Mhm.
And this also comes to why the important role of a counselor. You help them to understand that they are not really resisting, but there's a natural part of the body trying to protect to survive.
Mhm.
So they can, just by knowing that, they can retell the story.
Mhm. Yes, change their narratives and how they see themselves in that story. Because so many times we have this victim mindset
Yeah.
or where we think life just happens to us, but by
Mm.
empowering the clients to take charge and have some autonomy in their story and change the narrative for themselves, they can
Mm.
actually change what it means to them and they can change what emotions it brings up for them and how intense those emotions are felt in the body. But
Mm.
that also brings me to the stigma that is attached to seeking counseling and seeking help for
Yeah.
one's mental
Mm.
health,
Mm.
especially in Iran. And even growing up in Iran, it wasn't a practice that was usually practiced. Psychotherapy was mostly for people that were crazy, labeled as crazy, or they nobody thought it would apply to them.
Yeah.
So
Mhm, mhm.
um,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and it was always interesting to me to see that because even for
Mhm.
physical health, there are measures that you
Yeah. Mhm.
take, and this is mental health. So this is one aspect of it, and it should be talked about. It should be destigmatized, in my opinion.
Oh, Manna, you bring up a very good point here. We'll dive into details here. You mentioned about in Iran, and same as a lot of other different countries or cultures, there are different pace and different understanding in psychotherapy. For
Mhm.
example, for me, coming from the Chinese culture, is might be similar. Psychotherapy is something the crazy people or maybe the demon possessed
Mhm.
people are, and and it's interesting too because combining with the science of neuroscience, we understand the psychology underlying is actually the same. We use it for decision making. For example, buying groceries, buying vehicle, buying a house, or making decisions on career is actually all psychology. We can see well-functioning people but have that cognitive bias that make poor decisions in family, in choice of spouses, causing massive problems, even though they are not categorized as demon possessed or the crazy people.
Of course. And when you're, for example, when a client has anxiety and is constantly at states where
Yeah.
their cortisol is high and their brain is on alert, they tend to make poor decisions. So it's all a cycle. It's a cycle of the thought process, a cycle of decision making. When
Yes,
one
yeah.
part is dysfunctioning, the whole cycle will be dysfunctional. So it should be regulated and it should be thought about and explored. And I also wanted to,
Mm,
as you mentioned, decision making, there's the
yeah.
decision paralysis that comes with
Okay.
perfectionism, coming from the Middle Eastern culture in Iran, where self-worth and um achievements are very intertwined. It can be it can put a lot of pressure on the person that they tend to even avoid the task altogether. They don't feel motivated to start, but it's not about motivation. It's about that fear of and shame that is attached to failure for them. So it's when you talk to a therapist and you're telling them about your concerns with beginning something or making a decision, the therapist helps you think about what failure means or what failure means to you and how you see what the outcomes of this decision mean to you. So they help you, of course, for decision making and all those aspects.
Amanda here, um, can you tell us a little bit about you grow up in Iran, then how's the growing up? I mean, obviously there's a lot of different experiences, but how's the school system when they grow up? Is it a lot of competitions? Tell us a little bit more.
So, yes, there is a lot of competition in the school systems in Iran, I would say. So I attended an all-girls school. There's only all girls and all boys school. So
Yeah.
that is also a critical thing, I think, because
So there is the boys and girls are separated into two different. Oh, okay. So yeah. Mhm.
throughout the whole country. And in the sensitive age of developmental age in adolescence, I think the way individuals tend to express their
Yeah.
sexuality comes with a lot of confusion, shame, having to hide
Mhm.
themselves, which is not healthy. And they
Yeah.
express different kinds of sexuality in different ways. For
Mhm.
example, I'll give you examples. In high school in Iran, I had so many of my classmates I idolize and be obsessed with actors, Iranian actors, or um, even Hollywood actors, which were not real, but the obsession would persist for like the whole year. But
Yeah.
and they would cry over it. They because a lot of it's not talked about their emotions, their likings, their interests. They have to hide it. They feel like, but it's a part of your identity. Your sexual identity
Mhm.
is also a
Yeah.
part of who you are. So I think having to suppress that and not show that really affects one's ability to have relationships and express themselves in the relationships.
Mm. Yeah, Manna, you mentioned about the the sexuality and of course going through the school system, going through the puberty, and also the segregation with the two genders and the boys and girls are in different schools here. So in a way, when they're growing up, discovering their own sexuality, but they don't have a lot of interactions with the other gender or sexes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not openly talked about, so there's a lot of shame
Mm,
and stigma that comes with the inevitable sexuality that a person has. So that once they can't express themselves, and it affects how they see men or male figures in their life, and it definitely affects how they form relationships with men,
mm,
which is unfortunate, but it is what it is in Iran for now. Moving away 10 years ago when I did my last 2 years of high school in
mm,
Canada, I
yeah.
saw how different the problems
Yeah.
were. Yeah,
Okay.
I saw how like we had sex education, it was very openly talked
Mm,
about. There were safety measures being explained to people,
mm,
having vaccinations for people, for example, for HPV, which are very important health aspects that are very
yeah.
overlooked in Iran.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I was fortunate enough to move here, and hopefully I can help people um, express themselves in a healthier way. Especially, I want to also work with those coming from Iran because I know there are a lot of
Yeah.
immigrants newly coming. But I remember how that identity confusion was at first. You don't
Yeah.
really fully
Mm,
belong, and that sense of belonging really shapes your attachment, your um, happiness, your mental health. And I think being able to have a safe space where you can talk about these things is very important.
wow, there's a lot there, man. You mentioned about coming to do the last year of high school in Canada 10 years ago and receiving the not just mental health but public health education about some of the vaccines or some of the basic sex education and other things is a very sharp contrast. So you know the differences because
Mhm.
you have the point of reference
Yes.
compared to let's say if a person only live in just one country, they don't know the differences really.
And I
That's
really
very valuable here.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate my background in this collectivist culture because it allows me to have this cultural humility when I encounter people from different or similar cultures that have these certain expectations. I can relate to them more and understand their perspective because I also come from a similar culture. But also have been living here, and I've had so many Western family friends. So I also know how they work and how their families are. But I think I appreciate my knowledge and my background in a collectivist culture as well.
Yeah. And then let's go back to 10 years ago, the last year in high school. Your first year of high school in Canada here. Tell us more about the high school compared to Iran.
Very different. It was definitely a ton of a culture shock. Seeing how, for example, in the classrooms in Iran, you couldn't talk, um, you had to raise your hand for everything when you wanted to
Oh,
leave the
yeah.
house. I remember
Okay.
raising my hand and asking to go to the washroom, and he was like, "You can just go." That's yeah. And how people interacted with each other so openly. It wasn't um like people could talk to each other, come up to each other and talk to each other. As of Iran, it was mostly groups of like-minded people. And yeah.
Tell me more about the groups here because a lot of the viewers don't understand or maybe new to this topic here.
For example, in Iran, because of the culture of those who had certain beliefs or were more religious per se, they would be closer and they wouldn't be very open to those
Mm,
that are not as religious, for example. They wouldn't be very accepting of them, or they would have this
okay,
judgmental look. Um,
okay,
yeah, but there was some toxic dynamics, I would say. Whereas here, especially in Canada, which is a very diverse country and everyone is openly accepted, and we all appreciate the multiculturalism, there it was mostly mm, isolated. Like people wouldn't be as open and
okay,
accepting of other differences, I would say.
okay. So let's say back in Iran in the high school, how do they know each other? Oh, she is more religious and I'm less. And how do you tell? Is it by what do they tell by the appearance or clothing, the way they talk?
Now, both appearance and hijab, like those that
Okay,
fully covered themselves, even at an
okay,
all-girls school, they
okay,
were more religious, that you could tell,
okay,
or they would
okay,
participate in religious studies activities.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, it was not hard to tell, and they would usually stick together. So,
okay, yeah.
but I heard
So
from
Mele here.
that it only got worse with as it got closer to the university. So I'm glad
Mm,
that I got out when I did.
yeah, thank you for letting us know here, Mana. Because it is important here about the isolation. Even in Canada, we have the isolation of loneliness.
Hmm.
When we have these stigmas obstructing people to connect, and the attachment also point to the self-esteem and the community development.
Of course, yeah. There's isolation here as well, for sure, but it's not mostly because of the community per se or not being accepted by other people. It's mostly
Mhm,
from from one's own insecurity or their lack of self-esteem, which is all very important. And I think
mhm,
um, those are the things that can be for sure improved. And if one wants to be accepted in a community here and not wants to not be isolated,
mhm.
there are ways here. As of in Iran, it wasn't mostly about
Yeah,
having the self-esteem and the confidence to not isolate oneself. It mostly happened to you.
Okay. And here, Manna, you also bring up a really good point I want to point out for the viewers here. Because for psychotherapy and counseling, we focus on both the individual and also the system, the systemic forces around the client. So it is a holistic approach here. Internal and external, they are both equally important here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any of the oppressive forces or systems or unjust structures in a larger society here.
Yes, it's very important.
So, Mela, tell us a little bit about finding that sense of belonging when you are new or for anybody doing a change. Because in counseling, it's all about change here. People changing their relationships, jobs, countries, locations, or moving in different provinces. Finding that sense of belonging here.
So there's a lot of challenges that come with it. For example, I moved here after like in the middle of my high school, so I already had my friends, my
Yeah,
closely
yeah,
tied relationships with my family and everyone that was back home. So
yeah.
coming into a new culture where I had no idea what was going on, who were the people I was going to meet, or which school I was going to, everything was kind of unknown, and that uncertainty brought up some anxiety um, and excitement, which is kind of what um, happened to me because at the same time I was happy to be in a new environment. At the same time, I would get homesick. I would miss my friends and family. I was not sure if I'm assimilating the way I should, if I'm adapting as well as I should have. So there were all these anxieties around that. But what made me find my sense of belonging was the habits and the things that I wanted to do. So
Mhm,
getting
mhm,
closer to my goal and why I'm here and
mhm,
changing my perspective of things really helped me find that sense of belonging because you belong where you
mhm.
feel like you're being accomplished and where your needs are fulfilled.
The values and your goals help you anchor yourself in this change.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, Manna, you mentioned about doing this change, you're embracing something new. You're also grieving some of the losses and changes, such as your friends here. Can
Mhm.
you tell us a little bit about how is the process of staying in touch with your friends back home and any difficulty challenges there?
So, thanks to social media and internet connections, I was always very much connected to my friends. I wouldn't say as much. I could still call them. Um, we mostly texted, but
Yeah. Mm.
even now, we don't. I'm still connected and I'm still friends with my friends, my two best friends, and I do call them a lot. But one thing I realize is that now that I have responsibilities and adult work, staying in touch in a way that is like seeing my friends every week or every day, it's not very feasible. And I've had clients
Mhm.
tell me that their way of communication to stay close to their friends is sending reels, for example.
Okay, yeah.
But I personally think making a phone call and um, inquire, of course, that's also a way, but when you if you want to like decrease your doom scrolling or you don't want to spend that much time on social media, having that as a way of staying connected, I wouldn't say is as healthy, but
Mhm.
I definitely call and text with my friends, but it's definitely going to be less than what it was before. But I
Yeah.
want
Mm.
everyone to know that it's okay. And I think with age and having more responsibilities and becoming more clear on our goals and our missions in life, I think not being
Mm.
as much in touch with our friends from back home is also okay. So reminding ourselves that there are people even who live in the same city, like 2 blocks from each other, and their way of communication is sending reels. So staying connected and close is not about how close you are in proximity.
The manner here, I also want to ask a question, which seems very basic, but it's important to ask is, when you are talking to your friends or family members or other people in Iran and you are in Canada, how is the sense of work-life balance, the similarities and differences back home in Iran compared to Canada?
So one thing I would say is that self-care is not very bold in Iran. For example, I've seen my mom, so she's a surgeon, so she would be called into hospital at any time of the night, day. It
Yeah.
would disturb her sleep, her stress levels. Of course, a very stressful job. And the point of self-care wasn't very bold. I was always like, when is her like me time? When is her me time?
Mhm.
But what even from now, from the very beginning, I always mm, promote self-care because I think it's very important.
Mhm.
My way of self-care, for example, is journaling, going to Pilates, walking in nature, just spending some time with myself, for myself, to make that balance that avoids burnout. Because I think
Mhm.
when you're
Mhm. Mhm.
only working, 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 and your only focus is work, then burnout may happen and it would have a very dysfunctional
Mhm.
loop.
Mhm. And now that we are talking about burnout, can you tell us a little bit about how is the work culture um, differ in Iran compared to Canada, the working hours schedule? Because some cultures they work 6, 7 days a week, which is a norm. Some culture work 4 days. And tell us more.
So in Iran, it's 6 days a week, actually. It recently,
Oh, 6 days a week. Okay.
yes, it was, so it's Saturday to Thursday, and then Fridays are off. So which is very different.
Oh.
Yeah.
How come Friday is off?
Yeah, right. There it's like that. And Thursdays, they began to, for example, banks and schools are now, um, they have a half day on Thursdays now.
Okay, so they
But
really celebrate TGIF here.
yes, for sure. I think that's where it comes from.
Okay, I see. Okay.
But yeah, it's like mostly work is appreciated and working is promoted, and the hours are longer for sure.
Wow.
Um,
There's a lot of work there,
it's
six
a lot of
days.
work. And self-care is not very talked about, and it's not very put value upon it. But I think it's very important, and it's what really protects us from burnout and not enjoying what we're doing. Because I think you need to also like what you're
Mhm.
doing.
Wow. So, Manna, you're mentioning about working 6 days a week, and the accumulative stress is very different compared to Canada.
Yeah. And having no time to process those stresses during that happens throughout the week can also help us get overwhelmed, lead to not feeling fulfilled in our jobs, which is all leads to a dysfunctional pattern.
So, in a way, here, Manna, let's say if a clinician is seeing a client from who grew up in Iran compared to seeing the client who grew up in Canada here, when they talk about even the same word burnout, it can be totally different meaning and context.
I actually don't think we have a synonym for that word in
Okay, yeah, okay,
Farsi.
yeah,
I'm not sure. I've never heard of it. That's how
okay, yeah.
one talks about it is. Um, but yeah, it's also very important, and for therapists especially, I think because the quality of work and there's so many people, so many problems, so many things that are talked about in the session, and to be able to uphold that quality of work where you're fully present, fully mindful, and present for the client. You need to have that sense of calmness and peace of mind, which is all cultivated by self-care and having time to process them.
And Mena here, it is really wonderful to have you speaking on so many different important topics. Today we are running close to the end of our time, but we would love to invite you back to deep dig deeper into one of those topics here. And
Absolutely.
Manna here, so if any of the viewers or other counselors, psychotherapists want to contact you to ask more questions about these, to understand more about Iranian clients, different cultures, decision making, and all that, um, how they can contact you?
So I don't have an official website as of yet, but I do have a LinkedIn, and they can contact me through your practice. But I will also put up my website when it's done. Yeah, I'm just creating.
Okay.
But
We'll
my
make sure to put the LinkedIn link in the video of today.
Yes, and the best way to contact me, I would say, is you can text message or email.
Okay. We'll also put your phone number and email and your link there so people can find you, ask you further questions or consultations.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sumena, today we're great talking to you and we will welcome to see you again soon, okay?
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.